Building a business and life that blends contribution, fulfillment, and financial reward? Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the show for women in their 40s and beyond who are on this adventure. I'm Angela Rasmus, and I'm delighted you're here. Why, hello there, and welcome back to the podcast. It has been a wee while since I've released an episode, and that's because I've been hugely involved in a big personal project that's been on my to-do list for, to be honest, about 10 years, and that's not kidding at all. I've written a book. You may have heard, if you're in my communities, that I've been working on this for quite some time, or this may be news to you, but I'm celebrating because it is just an enormous personal milestone. But that's why I've been absent, because working with my own mindset coach, the recognition was you can't always give in all areas. So if I was going to go on this great creative project and really bring it over the line, perhaps another creative project may need to be paused for a while. So if you were looking for episodes, I do apologize. I really should have, inverted commas there, come on and let you know why I disappeared for a while, but not forever. Now, this episode today is the beginning of a new series, which I'm calling Under the Radar, Ordinary Women Doing Extraordinary Things. Now, I use that term, ordinary women, very carefully because I think we're all rather extraordinary. But what I mean by this is that there are so many stories of women in the world who are doing things that are very impactful, that make a difference in so many people's lives, and we miss them. They're under the radar because, especially with our media attention and the proliferation of social media and all the things, we often only hear about the more famous people, when people like you and I every day are doing things that are just, in my opinion, as important. So in celebration of the release of the book, which is called Your Next Chapter, Ditch Your Doubt, Own Your Worth, and Build the Business You Really Want, I decided to go out and find some more of these women. Now, the podcast as a whole really has had that slant. I've always looked to share the stories that inspire others to start their next chapters. But this is a bit special, I guess, this series, because it is really the epitome of what the book is all about. So if you've been in my world for a while, your next chapter can be something brand new that you're starting, something that you've been thinking about for a while, that's been tapping you on the shoulder, but you just haven't had either maybe the time, the inclination, the opportunity, the courage, the self-worth, all of the things that help us step into a next chapter. Maybe they were just, waiting for you to catch up. Or perhaps you have a business and you've been thinking, I am called to change this. There's a new angle that I want to take. There's a new service I want to introduce. There's a new message that's coming through. And I need to gather again my courage and connect to that deep sense of self-worth so that I can change direction. Both of those are classic next chapters. Another example of where a next chapter comes from is when you feel outraged, when there is something out there in the world that you're like, this is not okay. I really want to do something about this. And that's certainly the case of some of the women that I'm speaking with and sharing the stories over the next 8 weeks. We really went for it here. I've actually been putting out podcast episodes, usually on a fortnightly basis, but we're going for gold here. I'm going to be bringing them out each week over the next 2 months. And what do I want for you with this series? I really want for you to pause and ask yourself that question that is at the beginning of the next chapter change cycle. And that question is, am I discontent? Is there something that just isn't sitting well with me? Is there something I want to address? Is there something that I am called to talk about? Okay, so if that discontent is bubbling up, that's an invitation. It's an invitation to look deeper and see what is causing it and what is calling you. It's like a double C going on there. The next step in the cycle of change is desire. Once we've recognized our discontent, then it's very much a case of trying to work out, well, if this is what I don't want, or if this is what I'm not impressed or happy with, what do I want? And those two places, that discontent and desire, are what I call the deliberation zone. And we can spend a lot of time in the deliberation zone going backwards and forwards and forwards and backwards, recognizing the discontent, trying to put words and feelings around the desire, but not necessarily ready to move forward. At the center of the cycle of change, this is a diagram, a model, which is on the podcast episode, and it's also all over my website. You won't be able to miss it. What happens in the middle of that cycle is doubt and fear and misbeliefs and uncertainty. And those are some of the things that can keep you very firmly stuck in the deliberation zone. What breaks you out is the willingness to make a decision. Now, a decision is not a permanent thing. Once you've made a change, it doesn't mean that's it. You're committed to this new state forever and you can never change. No, not at all. A decision is simply a step forward and it breaks you free. It has energy associated with it that allows you to start moving. Now, as I say in the book and all the ways I talk, you can't steer a parked car. All of the ideas that are just on the drawing board, they cannot take shape and form and energy until you step across that threshold. Once you're out of the deliberation zone, then you are into the doing zone. So this is where you actually start putting your ideas into action. When you are designing what this next chapter is going to look like, and then you are delivering it to the world. And believe me, all those doubts and those fears and the misbeliefs and the uncertainty, they will be your fine companions all throughout the doing zone as well. Literally unavoidable. So this entire cycle that I'm speaking of is exactly what the book is all about. It takes you through each of these steps. It makes you aware of what are the things waiting around the corner that might try and hijack you and stop you from moving forward and making your mark in the world. And that's what these interviews that you're going to be hearing over the next few weeks are also about. Women who have negotiated this cycle and are either right at the start, they're right in the middle, they're on the other side and looking back and reflecting. There is so much wisdom that we as women have to share with one another. Now, I know for sure that stories have been catalysts for me. Stories has shown me possibilities because you can't be it if you can't see it. So you need, or in this case, hear it, I guess, since you're on a podcast. But those stories are what open doors of possibility for us. So what I've done is I've wrapped my framework I've wrapped my framework around these stories. It was actually looking back and reflecting on the points within my own life and when I made significant changes, and then when I started looking at all of the clients that I've worked with over many, many years, that's when the cycle became abundantly clear. It's unusual to skip any step. It's pretty sure that the cycle will come back again and again. In the book, I talk about, my first next chapter that I really was conscious of was coming to Australia at 19. It was like I expected to be here for 3 months. And, well, let's just say that at 51, if I think that's 3 months, my maths is pretty bad. So that was a major chapter. Another one was when I realized with 2 small children, 2 stepsons, I didn't want to go back to corporate world. That's when I started my own business way back in 2003. That was a definitive next chapter. And I remember terror at that time. Like, who was I to think that my wee corporate career up till then could be transformed into a business? Huge imposter syndrome, huge comparison trap. But I did it. Another chapter for me was at 37 when I finally got the help that I needed to ditch an addiction that was really curtailing my ability to really impact and expand and be the woman I've always been meant to be. Major, massive next chapter that everything else is built upon. And then my marketing agency, that at 42, I turned around and went, well, I've grown it from the dining room table when it was just me, and I've bought an office and I have full-time staff and everything looks fabulous. Only it wasn't, because I realized that once I had moved quite far into recovery and really connected with my own worth and really got clear on what were my values and what was important to me and how I wanted to impact the world, I had to change that too. So that was another massive next chapter. Writing a book. It's a pretty big one too. And I'm going to talk you through in this particular episode, the sort of steps that I went through there once I've given this overall summary, because that was huge for me as well. And right now there is a calling into establishing a new body of work that is sitting beside the masterminds and retreats and VIP days that I run for women now. That new body of work is coming through the Self-Worth Institute, because I know without a shadow of a doubt that self-worth, a strong connection to that absolute innate understanding of your worthiness, that is the access point to everything you need. Self-worth is the access point to courage, to creativity, to confidence, to resilience, all of the things that you need as a woman who is going to bring her work out into the world and make that difference. Self-worth is the key. Now, I've recognized that within my own coalface experience, but also with working again with so many women who have such talent, such brilliant ideas, such an ability to change things for so many people, and yet doubt was holding them back. And sitting underneath that doubt is a disconnection from the truth of your worthiness. I could talk about that for hours, and I do touch on it quite often in the book. I introduce you to the Self-Worth Trilogy and many tools that help you with that reconnection. Because it's not that you don't have self-worth. It's simply that over time, your connection to it has been frayed. The conditioning and the competition and the comparison and all of the things that make you feel less than or not as good as, to use another expression, they are the things that have frayed the connection to worthiness. But that doesn't mean that you can't repair it and reconnect strongly. And I definitely talk about that in the book as well. It's funny, actually, I found myself saying that so often. I talk about that in my book, or in my book I mention that. It's quite a weird feeling. It's quite a weird feeling, but an incredibly gratifying one as well. If you've been thinking of putting your thoughts on paper, or it's pretty digital these days as well, I hugely encourage you to. I discovered more about my own thinking going through this process than I ever could have any other way. Now, if you've been in my world a while, you'll realize how much I revere books. I sit here in my wee office utterly surrounded by them. Some of my greatest breakthroughs have been through reading books. You know that moment when you're reading and then it just hits you and you have to put the book down a moment and go, whoa. I talk of doing books, not just reading books, as in we can read a book and we can find so many fantastic ideas, but if we then just put it down and carry on, then you're missing an opportunity for transformation. Yeah, so doing a book means taking notes. Yes, defacing the book, dare I say it, with highlights and notes and those sort of things. Deciding what are the action points that I'm going to put in place as a result of what I have learned. So doing a book is pretty important, and I hope that when you get your hands on my own book that you do the book as well. And speaking of which, it's not actually available yet, but apart from pre-order. As I said, new process for me. I'm anticipating that it'll be out around the end of November, mid to late November. But in the meantime, you can certainly pre-order, and I'd love that. That would be tremendously fabulous. So to do that, you simply go to my website, angelarasmus.com. You'll see in the navigation book, and that makes it pretty easy to get to the page. But you can also go to it directly by going to angelarasmus.com/your next chapter book. And there you'll be able to order it. So the very first editions that come out will be beautifully printed with a bit of a bonus in the way that the book looks, but more about that later. So what was this whole process like? What actually got me started on writing a book? It really has been a lifelong dream. I have to be honest that I've harboured this fantasy for many, many years of lurking in a bookshop and watching someone take my book off the shelf and do what I do. Look at the front, flick to the back, read a few pages, just going through and taking little snippets here and there, and then sort of nodding and taking it to the counter and buying it. I would literally melt thinking about that happening. Told you I'm a book lover. But what stopped me? Well, for so long, I thought that, it's funny, you teach what you need to learn, huh? I thought that what I had to share was probably, it's been said before, What can I add? I'm not an expert. I'm not a guru. What I was doing was I was comparing the contribution that I wanted to make with the contribution of someone like Seth Godin or Brené Brown. I'm just looking at my bookcase now. People who have written so many books and have such a strong, impactful voice. But they started somewhere. Brené Brown talks about the shitty first draft. No, what is it? No, the effing first time. FFTs she talks about on her podcast. When you're doing something for the first time, you never have a polished, ending. You don't get it perfect. It's just not possible. And I've often listened to her and read about how when she's writing, how difficult she actually finds it. That we just assume, I just assume, looking from over here at this beautiful polished book that I've got in my hands, that it just came out like this. Well, now having been in this very similar experience myself, I realize that's just not the case. And whether it's a book or whether it's an aspect of your business or a new hobby that you're starting, anything, we all know that it doesn't turn out perfect the first time, but it's worth persevering. And that's what I had to get into my head, that perhaps I might not write a page-turning bestseller on my first book, but I needed to get started. And did you notice there I said my first book? That made me absolutely laugh when I realised that there's actually another book that's sitting in the back of my head that's asking to be written as well. And that really surprised me, but more about that next year. So it was this big fantasy for ages, and I took little baby steps towards it. Back in 2013, I wrote a chapter in an anthology. It was Business in High Heels. Success in High Heels, my apologies, that you can still find on Amazon, and there's my wee chapter in there. So that was my first foray into the world of books. And then in 2016, I actually created my own anthology called Spiritual Awakenings, The Many Paths to Connection. And that is an anthology. It had my wee story in the front, but I collected the stories of many women who were talking about how they found a connection to some concept of a higher power, whether that be universe, nature, your inner sage, God, however you described this sense of being connected to something bigger than yourself. I was really into that at the time, because in the recovery movement, it is a non-negotiable. One of the steps in the 12-step movement is that you come to believe in a power greater than yourself who can restore you to sanity. That's a pretty good description, because when you're in the midst of addiction, it does feel a bit insane. So I found my connection, which at first was quite challenging because I wasn't brought up in any sort of a religious or a spiritual home. So I had to find my own definition, and I loved the fact that I could define what this power meant to me. Then I got curious and wondered, well, how do other people actually approach this? And some of the clients I was working with at the time had these really, and I apologize if this is triggering at all, but had Catholic upbringings that they just pushed way away from. As they grew as women, they rejected their faith and were left sort of in this quagmire of, well, I'm just floating. So I was really curious with them, well, where is the next step for you? Because I really feel personally that having this sense of being taken care of is incredibly important to help us with courageous action. So I asked a whole load of women. I think there's 18 stories that are in the anthology. And so that gave me my next step. It didn't get printed. It's a Kindle only book. And yep, you can find it on Amazon. But there was a next foray. Then, of course, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I've done a lot of blog writing over the years. So there was these little bits of evidence that I could write, but it was getting over that, the style, a style as in a paddock or in a field, in a farm, that you go over that thing that helps you get over the fence, in case you don't know what I mean by style. So I knew that there was that possibility, but it was a big jump. Now, this is the example of a next chapter that keeps tapping you on the shoulder. The triggers for me were seeing other people who were publishing books, and that itch just wouldn't go away, and I'd actually get quite cranky with myself. So I knew that something had to happen. So what helped? Well, for me, I was incredibly fortunate. I've been in masterminds for a very long time. I believe that they are one of the most positive ways of being supported in business. And in the mastermind that I was in, there was an author coach, a formidable, fabulous, wonderful, warm and welcoming woman. A lot of alliteration there. And I started getting curious when I heard her stories of how she was supporting the authors that she was working with. At this stage, there'd been no confession that I wanted to write a book. I was just listening and thinking, wow, the thoughts that she's sharing about what her authors go through, even the ones that are writing their third or fourth book, wow, I'm not alone. Again, the power of a story, the power of examples to help connect us or help us really recognize our discontent and connect us to our desires. So eventually, I got brave. Her name is Candice Davies. She's in Atlanta, I think, in America, and she is incredible. We had a conversation. We started talking about what it was that I was wanting to achieve. And it's so funny. I think Candice did for me what I do for so many other people. She helped me believe in the possibility of what I wanted to create. So I hired her and we started the steps forward. We had a big long call about what the book could contain, and then life got in the way again. That was back at the beginning of 2018. That was a really tough year. My husband was hospitalized twice, emergency surgery, all sorts of things were happening in my life. So the book went back on the shelf again. I actually picked up my original writing pad. I have writing pads for all different aspects of my business, and this one's got My Book Project 2018 written across the front. And of course, here we are right now, October 2020, and only now is this book making it out into the world. So look, sometimes our dreams and our projects get detoured. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that you'll never go back to them. But if it's important, it won't be discarded. It will come back into your world. And yes, in 2020 it did. I spent some time with another wonderful friend where we were in her office for a day, Sonia Walker, who runs Kids First down in Brookvale here in Sydney, Australia. And we put all of my ideas out onto a whiteboard, just got them thrown out there. Because your head is not a filing cabinet. You need to get your ideas out into the world. And once I could actually see them, when she questioned me and got me with the mind flowing again, suddenly I got an appreciation for how much there was inside of me that I could share, just like there is in you. Not necessarily, you don't have to write a book, but in terms of recognizing the depth of your experience. This is why I love working with women in their 40s and beyond. No offense to our younger selves, but this is when we can really comb those depths of experience and recognize what we do have to share. So I took that and I looked at it all and I built it around the model that I'd been creating, the next chapter change cycle. There was the structure of the book. Suddenly it became clear to me, and that was very exciting. Now, I'm a huge fan, just with a little asterisk here, of having a model or two in your business, a visual model to be able to show people the way in which you help them, work with them, deliver your solution, your philosophy, however you like to describe that. Creating a visual model is incredibly useful. It's one of my superpowers, to be honest. I think in models. It's quite weird. It's one of the things that I most often do with my clients is work with their concepts and put them into a model that can help communicate those thoughts in a very succinct and impactful way to the world. So I had my wee model and I could see how the pieces were going to fit around it. And so the book actually started to come to life. So that brain dumping part and the model were incredibly important. I also recognize that, and this came through conversations with Candice, is that I'm a contributor, not the expert. I don't have to be the expert. Okay, there are hundreds of books written about change. There are thousands of books written about business. There are probably millions of books written for women. Okay, and I didn't have to rise to the top of the heap and be the only voice. Not at all. I'm a contributor. And that is the core of, I think, what Next Chapter businesses are all about. Contribution, fulfillment, financial reward. So when I could settle myself down and realize that I'm not adding to the noise, I'm adding to the conversation with my contribution, that also made me feel a little more grounded. The next step was setting realistic goals. Okay, I'd had to let go of the book in 2018. It was back in my world in 2020. What was I going to set as goals? Now, in the book, I talk about trifecta goals and I talk about SMART and HEART goals. So I use my own methodology. So you've probably heard of SMART goals. They're specific, they're measured, they're achievable, they're realistic, they're time-focused. Incredibly important to have those. But I like to balance them with heart goals. So heart goals are the more feminine side of the energy. They're harmonious, engaging, aspirational, refreshing, and transformative. So when I could set my goals around those two and balance the two of them, I got a lot more clear. Now, trifecta goals are when you have 3 levels of achievement. So you're not just saying, there's the goal, and if I don't reach that, life is terrible. You give yourself these stepping stones along the way. So I brought them together. So, for example, my first goal was to release the book as a personal milestone, because I'd wanted to do this for so long. Excuse me. And that was very much a heart goal. That was aspirational for me. It was transformative. It was engaging me. It was definitely refreshing. So all of the pieces in heart. Okay, it was also a goal of being purposeful, to be a catalyst for other women by sharing my thoughts and showing them how they could boost their belief and use a system for moving forward. Okay, so that was very much a heart goal as well. The third heart goal was about lifting my brand. Letting people discover me through a bookshop, through a bookshelf, on Amazon, many different ways, hopefully with people talking about the book and sharing it and referring it, that more people would find me in the world. So all 3 of those goals could easily be ticked. Then over the top of them, I put the more SMART goals on a trifecta basis. So my first goal was to write a fabulous book of 35,000 words. The next one was write that fabulous book of 45,000 words. And my unicorn goal, as I call it, so that it's acceptable, stretch and unicorn, was to write a book of 50,000 words. That seemed like, whoa, a huge goal. Well, we hit 53,000, so I made the unicorn goal. And yes, there was a lot of celebration at the time. So hopefully you can see here that there was the personal heart-based goals as well as the more very specific SMART goals that I was leaning towards. And I also made sure that the environment in which I was writing was conducive for me. I bought a lot of candles, spent a lot of money on aromatherapy mists and oils. There's certain music I play all the time, and I got myself into a definitive routine. I wrote every morning at 6 a.m. Sorry, that's not true. I wrote most mornings at 6 a.m. because some mornings I just wasn't feeling it. But the regularity of that practice, it became a little reverential, up before the rest of my family, making the cup of tea, watching the sunrise, allowing the thoughts to land. This was about creating before I consumed. Now that's an expression I've talked about on previous podcasts, is that before you hit social media, before you hit your inbox, before you hit the rest of the needs of the world, create, because that's when your connection to your original thoughts are strongest. Yeah, well, that's my experience. Hopefully it might be useful for you as well. So that routine was important. And of course, I had Candace. I had my author coach that when I was up, when I was down, when I was in between, I had that anchor with her to look at my work and talk me through it. Now, there is an expression that I use. It's on my website, but I expand on it in the book itself, which is borrow my belief in you until you have it for yourself. There's actually 3 steps to that. Okay, so the first one is that you believe in me because I can't yet see the potential that I have. That's the role that Candace absolutely played for me. Then the next step is I believe in you. As in, I begin to believe what you're saying about my potential. Maybe I can write a book. And the third step is I believe in me. I'm doing this. It's happening. This is pretty darn good. Okay, so that 3-step process we all go through. Whilst I absolutely believe that we need that self-worth connection that I spoke about earlier, the self-worth connection comes internally. It does not rely on external validation at all. It doesn't mean that you need anyone's approval any longer. And that's one of the beauties about getting older. We do tend to realize that the truth that other people's opinions are of no importance. But nevertheless, there's a process to get to that point. Okay, and so in my case, Candace and a couple of my other beautiful belief buddies helped me keep moving forward to actually bring this book into the world. Then the last piece really was prioritizing myself. Now, what do I mean by that? The book, all the pieces were there, all the chapters were written, but as anyone who goes down this path will quickly realize, editing. It's just like, it's like a mantra. You just have to keep going through it. And I knew that I would not knock this project off in the little snatches of time that I had at the 6 a.m. here at home before the world, descended and all my responsibilities were there. So what I actually did is that I booked myself 4 nights in a beautiful little cottage, and I took myself, my laptop, my aromatherapy oils and all those sort of things, and I went away. My family were fully understanding and supportive of this. Go and do it. And that was the breakthrough that I needed. When I had this time, this absolutely focused time on my project and my goals, suddenly it all came together. I also had the beautiful support of my book buddies. That was a wee pop-up Facebook group. And if you were in there and you're listening, thank you so much, because your help in terms of providing me with snippets of quotes and feedback and thoughts that have been brought into the book was incredibly valuable. So I had those lovely ladies that I would, when I was editing away, I'd pop some ideas into the group and go, okay, have you experienced this? What's your story around that? And I amalgamated those into the book. So even though I had the privacy and the focus, I also had the connection, that lovely balance. And so yes, at the end of those 4 days, I had the book ready to send off to the editor. Now I'm working with the wonderful Bev Ryan, who has Smart Women Publish, and she's taking care with her editor and her designers to work on the cover and everything else. I think you're going to love what has come out the other side. And I certainly recommend Bev as your book production manager if you find yourself in this scenario as well. And so here we are. We are on the cusp of my own next chapter. I would love to think that you will be inspired or motivated to go and grab yourself a copy, whether that be a hard copy that will be mailed out to you, or whether that be the Kindle version, which you'll be able to find there very soon as well. It was an exciting process, and to be able to see the body of work come together in a way that hopefully makes my ideas accessible. What I'm always after is to be a catalyst, to be the link in the chain of support for you, for other women, just enough to get you moving in the direction of your dreams. Yes, of course, I offer services that help you deepen that, but the most important point is starting. It's getting out of that deliberation zone and into the doing zone, because this is an evolution. It's not a revolution. It's not that everything works the second you make the decision, but that decision has got so much energy about it, and it does set the wheels in motion. You're going to change. If you look backwards with hindsight, that's compassionate reflection, you'll see how much you have changed over the years. There's much more change waiting for you just around the corner, but you need to move towards it. You need to take those steps. That's the essence of a next chapter. I really believe that life is too short for us not to be doing the work in the world that we're here for. And you know that's true as well. When you feel that, when you stop, and when you really feel that in your heart, there's something else possibly that is calling you. If you're already in that sweetest of spots where, contribution and fulfillment and financial reward are all intersecting, celebrate yourself. That is fantastic. I've got no doubt that you are having an impact. But I also have no doubt that there will be little cycles of change that are still waiting for you as you pivot closer and closer and closer to a sweet spot as another one emerges over the horizon. We're all here to grow. That is our purpose. We're all here to contribute. That is our purpose. It's not how am I valuable. I apologize. It is actually that. Let me just retrack there for a moment. It's not are you valuable. It is how are you valuable, because we all are. It's just a case of working out where will my contribution be. So as you listen to the stories from all of my fabulous guests over the next 8 weeks, I want you just to listen for the similarities, to listen for the possibilities, to see how similar we actually are in terms of our thoughts and our feelings and our desires and our fears, all of those things. And none of them stop us from stepping into a next chapter, not when we have the support and the desire. Those two are a really, really essential combination. So I hope you've enjoyed this rambling episode about all the things that have been happening. I hope that you enjoy the conversations that are coming up. I hope that you grab a copy of my book, Your Next Chapter, Ditch Your Doubt, Own Your Worth, and Build the Business You Really Want. But most of all, I hope that your next chapter wraps itself around you with that gorgeous combination of the sense of contribution and fulfillment. So thank you for listening to the podcast episode. If you'd like to have a conversation with me, you can always email me through my website. You can always send a direct message through Instagram. You can always find me on Facebook. All the things will be under Angela Rasmus, and I would love to hear your own next chapter story. Until we talk again, have a wonderful day. Take care. Thanks so much for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. I really do appreciate your time. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. And of course, my website, angelarasmus.com. If you enjoy the show, I'd love you to share it with another woman who's in the midst of business and life beyond 40. And if you love it, a review on iTunes or whatever app you listen in on would be fabulous. Reviews somehow impact that deeply mysterious algorithm and make it easier for the show to be found, which is always a good thing. So thanks again, and until next time, take care.